stood at the counter, red in the face, steam practically rising from his collar. Not from the coffee. No, that wasn't hot enough, apparently. But from something deeper, something colder. The kind of anger that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with control. "This is unacceptable," he said, loud enough for the rest of the shop to hear. "I asked for hot coffee. This is lukewarm garbage." I stood there, a teenage barista with a paper apron and trembling hands, holding a drink I'd pulled fresh from the machine. Still piping hot, still steaming, still not enough for this man whose ego had been bruised by the mild inconvenience of his morning routine. I didn't speak. What could I say? But then James appeared. James, the shift manager, the owner's son, my classmate. Just another high schooler like me, except he had the power to say the words that changed everything. "Is there a problem here, sir?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The man turned his anger toward him without hesitation. "Yeah, your barista here gave me cold coffee. Doesn't seem to understand what hot means." James didn't flinch. He looked at me, then back at the man, and said it. Flat, emotionless, final. "OP, this is unacceptable. You're fired." And just like that, I played my part. "No, please," I whispered, voice cracking. "Please don't fire me. My family needs this. I need this job. Please, I didn't mean to mess up." I took off my apron slowly, like I was peeling away a piece of my dignity. My shoulders sank. My eyes dropped to the floor. I didn't have to fake the fear completely. It wasn't hard to imagine what it might feel like if it were real. The man's face shifted. His anger wilted into something less powerful, something human. Regret. "Wait, I didn't mean it like that," he stammered. "You don't have to fire her. It's not that big of a deal." But James stayed in character. "We take customer service very seriously, sir. I'm sorry, but this is the standard we hold ourselves to." The customer tried again, softer this time. "Come on, it was just a complaint. I didn't want anyone to lose their job." I left through the back. 10 minutes later, I came right back in, tied my apron back on, and went back to wiping down tables. No one else in the shop seemed to notice. But that man, he stayed quiet. He watched me like a ghost had walked back in. He didn't say another word. Because the joke, the performance, wasn't for laughs. It was a mirror. We'd stumbled on it by accident, James and I. A coping mechanism that became something more. A performance that forced people to face the human cost of their tantrums. And yeah, sometimes it felt good. Really good. But the truth is, we didn't start doing this to be clever. We started because we were tired. Tired of being target practice for grown adults in bad moods. Tired of being kids treated like punching bags for minor inconveniences. Tired of swallowing our pride just to keep someone else's coffee hot enough. We were just teenagers. James, me, Danielle from the local college, showing up for our weekend shifts, pulling espresso shots, restocking syrups, and trying to make it to our next paycheck. None of us signed up to be emotional shock absorbers for strangers who couldn't find a better outlet for their rage. But it kept happening. A customer would walk in with a chip on their shoulder and dump it on the counter. Too much foam. Too little sugar. Not fast enough. Not friendly enough. They didn't want coffee. They wanted to feel important. And when things didn't go their way, they lashed out at the nearest person wearing an apron. At first, we tried to shrug it off. Let it roll off our backs. But that wears you down. And one night, during a lull between orders, James and I were sitting on milk crates in the back room, swapping horror stories. He joked, half joked, that we should start fake firing each other in front of the worst customers just to see how they'd react. The next weekend, we tried it, and it worked. They almost always backtracked, almost always apologized. Some even looked haunted, like they'd just glimpsed the consequences of their behavior for the first time. And maybe they had. Maybe, for 1 second, they imagined what it would be like to have their bad mood cost someone their job. Maybe they saw the teenager behind the counter not as a service object, but as a person, a kid, someone with bills, with dreams, with a family. So we kept doing it. When someone screamed at Danielle for taking too long to make a smoothie, James fired her. When a woman threw a tantrum because we didn't have the right kind of almond milk, James fired me. Every time we played our roles. Every time they looked stunned. And every time the world shifted just a little. But the story doesn't end with applause, because eventually I told some friends from school what we were doing, and not all of them laughed. "That's kind of messed up," one said. "You're letting people think they ruined someone's life." Another chimed in. "You're playing with guilt. That's not funny. That's mean." And for a second, I hesitated. Were they right? Were we just flipping the script for revenge? Were we becoming the bullies? Was our little performance a form of justice? Or just another power trip? I thought about it for days, because it wasn't black and white. It never is. These people were being rude, disrespectful, entitled. But what if, underneath all that, they were just hurting? What if someone snapped at me because they'd just lost their job? What if they yelled about cold coffee because their partner had left them that morning? What if their rage had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with something I'd never see? I didn't know, but I also knew this. We never humiliated them. We never shouted back. We never filmed it. We didn't chase internet clout or post their faces online. We simply held up a mirror, one that asked, "Is this really who you want to be?" And most of them, the ones with a conscience, didn't like what they saw. They apologized. They lowered their voices. Some even came back the next week, quieter, kinder. One man tipped $20 and said nothing. Maybe they thought we were fired and rehired. Maybe they didn't want to talk about it. Maybe they didn't want to face the truth of what they almost caused. And maybe that's okay. Because at the end of the day, we weren't trying to ruin anyone. We were trying to survive. Trying to protect ourselves in a world where the people behind the counter are often invisible. Where a teenager's dignity can be shattered for the crime of slightly imperfect foam. Where the customer is always right has become an excuse for cruelty. So, am I the asshole? For pretending to get fired when someone screams over coffee? For making people think, just for a moment, that their words have power? That their anger has consequences? That the world doesn't revolve around their morning latte? Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the one who gets hurt. This story isn't about coffee. It's about power and perspective. It's about the quiet violence of entitlement, the way it can erode someone's self-worth in 5 seconds flat. And it's about the simple, radical act of making someone feel what they've caused. There's a reason this story resonated with thousands of people, because anyone who's ever worked a register, worn an apron, or been talked down to by a stranger knows that feeling. That sharp sting of being treated like less. And maybe, just maybe, the only way to wake people up is to let them taste the consequences of their own behavior. But here's the question I want you to sit with. Have you ever made someone feel small over something insignificant? Have you ever let your bad day become someone else's worst moment? And if so, what would you do if the person you just yelled at started to cry and quietly took off their apron? Let us know in the comments. And if you've ever worked in customer service, drop your wildest story. This is your vault too. Like, subscribe, and never forget, every face behind a counter has a story. And sometimes, the quietest stories are the ones we need to hear the most. This is AITA Story Vault. Thanks for listening.